Hello and welcome to my graduate presentation. My name is Lisa Evers and I'd like to welcome the advisors, my fellow students, family and friends, and most importantly my daughter and my grandson who are here for my support and to hopefully hear this for the last time in person. Basically what I'm going to do is sort of go through quickly how I ended up at Goddard, what my thoughts were, what brought me to Goddard, and sort of the evolution of this tool of mine called Comfort Quest. So without further ado, why graduate school at Goddard College? Well, as it all started out, I had this idea after being a nurse for like 30 years about a unique healing solution to the pain and opioid crisis. But what I felt was that I had this great idea and sort of a vision and a possible solution, but I really felt like I had no voice as a nurse. What was I going to do with it? So I could either keep being frustrated, share my idea with my local patients and colleagues, or try to fit my idea into an existing frame of reference, none of which really seemed to work. So I found a postcard that I've been keeping for some time from Goddard College, and I said, well, let me call these people and see what we could do. So I decided to attend Goddard, where I could creatively explore several different disciplines in a supportive academic environment in Vermont, and the best bonus was I was close to my family in Massachusetts, and in addition, the Veterans Administration was very supportive of this idea. So I ended up here in August of 2016, and here we are 36 credits later and I'm finished. So you might be asking, what is this thing called Comfort Quest? Well, what I realized after working in healthcare for several decades was a big frustration with this constant focus on pain. And some of the things that really spawned my interest was a experience that I had with philosophy. I took a philosophy, a grad school certificate program in applied ethics. And some of the philosophers that I was really involved with were Carl Jung, which I really enjoyed, that which we resist persists. And I felt that that really spoke to this constant struggle that we've been fighting against pain for all this time. Years ago, when I started even working with the pain scale, I realized that it just seemed counterintuitive. Why, if we want people to be comfortable, why do we keep trying to stuff down that thing called pain? That typically is our body's way of giving us some insight that something might be wrong. So that was the first thing that sort of got me going. And then with the addiction issue that we've been struggling against, the quote by Albert Einstein is, problems cannot be solved with the same mindset that created them. And as we know now, several years down the road with our addiction issues, we just keep throwing more money on things. We keep trying to treat people once they have addictions and all of these things, but even with that, they still keep getting asked the same question, what is your pain level? And it keeps coming back to pain again. So my thought was that maybe that pain question is part of the problem. And so what would we do about that? So we still needed to look at a different way around things. And so what I decided in Wayne Dyer's infinite wisdom was, if you just change the way we look at things, the things you look at change. And so that's where those are the three big things that have sort of framed my approach to this new scale, or this new tool that I created, which is called Comfort Quest. So what I'm going to do is just sort of break down a little bit more about each of the quotes and how they apply to this project. This is a picture, as you can see, of something that we're sort of familiar with now, the current pain scale. Either the top one, which is 0 to 10 is always 0 to 10, 10 being the worst possible pain and 0 no pain. Well, it seemed like sort of silly that who wants to be a 0? Like, our goal is to be a 0. It doesn't seem to make sense, but that's how this is framed. And our current treatment plan, the way we've been doing this now, has just not been effective. And despite the fact that we've quadrupled the sales of opiates between 1999 and 2013, yet the CDC reports that there's really not been a significant increase of our satisfaction of overall pain management by patients who struggle with pain. And so what we've gotten now is just more addictions, more deaths, and in 2016, 64,000 souls were lost to opioid addiction. And so this war on drugs is something that we're losing. And one of the things that I keep seeing with this is that 10 in this case equals fear. And in reaching out to patients with the transition that's going on and all the restrictions on prescriptions, now it's very evident that folks are very fearful, and they are trying to fight against this terrible pain, and now they're even in more fear because of the fact that pain medication is being curtailed. So clearly our current plan is not working. And if things were working the way they were, I'd say so be it. It's great. It's just like, let's leave things the way that they are. But as a nurse, I just, if something's broken, I just really feel like we need to try to at least look at it differently and come up with a better idea. I like this graph because it really does show how the drug overdoses have really accelerated over the course of the last 16, 17 years, starting with, less than 5,000 a year of each of the different types of drugs that are have been found to cause or found responsible for overdose deaths. And if you notice this blue line, this is the synthetic opioids other than methadone, and so that's going to be your fentanyl, which is really a bugaboo right now. And one of the things that's a big push is to let's stop the fentanyl. Well, it's still not going to solve anything because people are still going to be driven to want to take, if they're getting killed by fentanyl, they're going to be getting killed by something else because it's the drive for the addiction or after the medication. It's not the medication themselves that's actually killing people. So just as a general overview, like we said, the 64,000 drug overdoses in 2016. The fentanyl is that blue line, which is really awful. So what's driving the need for more drug use over the last 17 years? It just doesn't seem to be logical that, what's happened. So my hypothesis is that part of the problem might be our focus on pain. As everybody has chronic pain. 1 in 3, I think, is now the latest statistics that people just are focused on pain. And granted, stress is one of the huge issues, and that intensifies things. So I think that pain is symptomatic of much more complex issues and life stressors, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. And instead of just medicating the symptoms, we really need a different look. It's my opinion that we need a different lens to look below the surface and refocus on healing these wounds instead of just covering up the symptoms. So as I said, problems cannot be solved with the same mindset that created them. And I don't know if you were familiar with this, but the pain as the fifth vital sign was the idea of a physician by the name of James Campbell in 1996, who at an American Pain Society said vital signs are taken seriously. So his thought was that if pain were assessed with the same zeal as vital signs are, it would have a much better chance of being treated properly. And shortly thereafter, the VA and the Joint Commission jumped on the bandwagon, and the fifth vital sign was born. So when I started as a nurse, that was before any of this, and I remember just feeling like, it didn't feel right. And this gets back to just really listening to your gut. And granted, as a nurse, I had to go along with this because, this is how we quantified whether our patients were feeling better or not when we medicated them. And so that's fine, but I think, quite honestly, that it has been a huge source of what's driving our constant focus on pain and our inability to help patients become more comfortable. And so, of course, anybody who's worked in the hospital, once the reimbursement started getting tied to patients being completely satisfied, doctors were more driven to prescribe opiates because, of course, that makes everybody happy. Everybody's happy. So this has always been focused on suppressing pain, which feeds fear. Because every time you ask a patient what's going on, 0 to 10, 10 being the worst pain ever, just think about that. If you're thinking about what your worst pain ever is, that naturally, as you're reliving that triggers fear, and the neurochemicals associated with that limits your body's ability to find solutions to things and just puts you in a very defensive mode. So suggestibility and expectation work both directions. So if we're expecting fear, expecting pain, that feeds the fear. What if we decided to reframe that and go the other direction? So as we're building on this, the suggestibility and expectation, I think, are the keys to unleashing the power held within our own bodies. So instead of giving that power up to pills constantly, what if we harness that and let's do it in a positive way? So instead of being bombarded constantly with negativity, fear, pain, and pathology, and author Vance reminds us that everybody's door to expectation has a different key, and everyone is suggestible in a slightly different way. But once that door is unlocked, we have access to an amazing power to heal ourselves. And I think that is extremely powerful, because the way that we're handling these situations today is, patients come in with pain, and we give them a cookie cutter. You start with some, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, you bump up a little bit, maybe some Toradol, maybe some Ultram, and then you end up to opiates and all of these things. But what if we just suggested to patients that, how comfortable do you feel today? Instead of the expectation being fear. It's just an idea, but I think it's one that's worth discussing. And Dr. Siegel, in his book called Mindsight, has reminded us what fires together wires together, and he's talking about the neurons in the brain. And while we've been focusing on pain with the current scale, perhaps this has strengthened the synapses towards pain perception. So he reminds us that one of the key practical lessons of modern neuroscience is that the power to direct our attention, just think of that, the power to direct our attention has within it the power to shape our brain's firing patterns, as well as the power to shape the architecture of the brain itself. So what he's saying is that just by what we are focusing on controls the ability of the neurons firing, and that changes the actual shape and the flow of the information through the brain itself. Extremely powerful. But try to tell patients that now who are hooked on opiates, it's a hard sell. However, I don't give up. So if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. One of my favorite authors, Wayne Dyer. Let's see, here we go. Let's click. There we are. So in the Biology of Belief, Bruce Lipton, who's a PhD, I don't think he's an MD PhD, but he teaches med school. He explained the difference in how you look at things. If you choose to see a world full of love, your body will respond in growing and health. But if you choose to believe that you live in a dark world of fear, your body's health will be compromised as you physiologically close yourself down in a protection response. So that's powerful. So, like looking at things through rose-colored glasses without, any, in a Pollyanna kind of way is not what we're talking about, but just, reframing things in a positive way has the opportunity to open up some serious new horizons and growth and expansion versus constriction, which is extremely important. Fredrickson, in her book, Positivity, says by opening our hearts and minds, positive emotions allow us to discover and build new skills, new ties, new knowledge, and a new way of being. To me, that's very powerful. So that said, I'm talking honest negative emotion as still being important. But we're not trying to just pretend stuff's, we're not just trying to put on a happy face and pretend things are fine, because our negative emotions are extremely important, but we don't have to focus on them. We need to go ahead and feel them and then move through it. And as Fredrickson reminds us, in all of her studies that she's done, she found out that you need to have 3 positive emotions to 1 negative emotion in order to have a good quality of life. So the thing I like about that, it's not 3 to 0. You still can have your we all have bad days, and we can still have a negative emotion, and yet if we consciously, mindfully realize that if I'm having, fear and anxiety, then I need to also then take that and focus on 3 more positive feelings to help counteract that wave of negativity that is stirred. So this opens up the ability to be totally honest with ourselves and to truly feel and also release whatever emotions may bubble up instead of trapping them or trying to suppress them. And I think that is, that's been really important in my work so far. So here's a picture of my original design, which had, I like the colors. If you notice, if you're familiar with chakra work, that's pretty much red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple. I kept it with the 0 to 10 to sort of to mirror the existing pain scale, so that we're basically building on what's existing, and we're just sort of reframing it, we're flipping it. But what I realized was that pain-free was not really what we want. That is not the goal. And I think that's been a huge problem with what our pain management's been striving for these days. Instead, I think it's important that we listen to our bodies instead of silencing them. And so this is, as you notice, nothing's really changed except feel and release. And at the end of all this, I'll say, well, actually, maybe I'll say now, after I've gone through this and finished my thesis and done some more reading and things, what I'm actually thinking to modify even further is that there should be another step of forgiveness, feel, forgive, and release. And I think forgiveness of both of ourselves and others is another piece of the healing triad that we need to consider in tracking and processing our emotions. So pain is positive. I want to start seeing it as a positive transformative lens instead of something that we suppress. We want to hear its messages, feel the sensations, and release it with love. I see it as an exciting new vision. It's familiar because it's still 0 to 10, but instead of 10 being the worst pain ever, it is a peak experience. And in saying, oh, okay, how comfortable do you feel? 10 being your most peak experience, you're naturally releasing those, I'm sitting on the edge of the beach with my best friend, we're drinking some wine, we're relaxing, you're exploring the Grand Canyon, lots of different things, but just doing that releases the beneficial neurotransmitters in your body, which point you towards health and vitality. So in this case, 10 equals comfort, which equals love. From a chemistry perspective, or from a little bit more of a scientific perspective of what happens when we focus on pain all the time, I think we can mostly all agree that when we're in pain, it creates anxiety. Chronic pain then creates depression as well, and all of these things feed one another. And this just gives us a little overview. It's not extremely, I'm sure it's not exact. However, in a very general way, you can see that dopamine, it's existing here with anxiety and depression, but the serotonin is really, really super low, and there's hardly any oxytocin. And as my next slide will show how that each of those things has extreme amount of bearing on our physiology and our emotions. So the dopamine, which is the blue, is the feel-good hormone, which keeps us motivated and lets us enjoy what we really like. It's one of the reasons that we want to, when we have big goals, take baby steps and celebrate each step along the way, because that releases the dopamine and we just keep, wanting to do a little bit more and keeps us motivated. There's a list of some foods that are helpful for that, which I think is fascinating. If we could reach for, some yogurt or a handful of nuts or, avocado, banana, any of those things when we're feeling as though we need some motivation, that certainly does a whole lot better than reaching for a pill or, something else. Serotonin is the neurotransmitter that helps us feel important, and it helps plays a critical role in how we basically live our lives. It regulates mood, sleep patterns, and appetite as well. And if you are familiar with the antidepressants, a lot of them are the SSRIs, which are the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which basically prevents your body from breaking them down. So in essence, you're creating, you're allowing more serotonin to be in the body. So one of the best things is to go outside in the sunshine, which I think is fascinating. I know I always feel better when I do that. Enjoy where we are at this moment, which is why mindfulness and being present is extremely important. And take pride in your accomplishments. And I think everyone who's here today that's going through their graduate presentations, we're all feeling pretty good about this, and we're really happy with what we've come up with. And we need to give each other big pats on the back and such. It's been an amazing process. And also reflect on your prior successes. Some of the things that help to reinforce the serotonin are the complex carbs, those warm comfort foods. I'm sure macaroni and cheese would be in there too. Sweet potatoes and carrots. My favorite, yes, I eat too many carrots, but hey, that's my serotonin fix, I guess. Oxytocin is another of the bonding hormones, which is really important for love. And if you don't have anybody in your life right now, you can have a massage, offer hugs to one another, and be trustworthy yourself, see yourself as a huggable person. And Gabor Mate reminds us how important this particular hormone is, neurotransmitter is, in that it interacts with the opioids. It actually increases the sensitivity of the brain's opioid system to the endorphins. So when people are feeling loved and connected, they are more receptive to opioids in their own system, the endorphins in their own system. But on the other hand, if they're cut off from everybody, it takes more endorphins to actually feel the high. So I mean, connection's a huge piece of all this. And finally, the endorphins that respond or actually affix to this is the hormones that basically are similar to the opioids. They are released in response to pain and stress and help relieve anxiety and depression. So it creates a brief euphoria that helps to mask physical pain, which is why folks take the opioids, and when they come off of them, they also have extremely high increases of anxiety and depression. So you have to just be careful that when you start backing off, when patients back off of the opioids, they also have those other issues bubble up. But the point with all of this is that if we give our bodies support through the transition, that our bodies will make the neurotransmitters themselves that can help us deal with pain and discomfort in our bodies. So one of the things you'll notice on your chairs is that there's little bags, and in there are vanilla as an oil, lavender, or vanilla extract I should say, lavender, and also some dark chocolate nibs for you to enjoy, so that if you're feeling stressed or discomfort, having any discomfort, use those and see how you feel with them, and see if you can get some of your own endorphins released. And one of the important things is that positive expectations also turn on our endorphin system. So think about how powerful that is. But the way that our current pain scale is now, there's no really positive expectations involved with that. There's the expectation that, oh my God, you're going to be in pain, and that we're going to have to do something to help you, versus, oh, you could be comfortable and we're going to support that. And then of course the final neurotransmitter is the cortisol, which is the one that is constantly released when we're under stress, and there's no shortage of that in our bodies. But of course, taking frequent deep breaths and envisioning the positive are some of the most important things that we can do to help regulate that. So as it sounds like it may be a bit complicated, but the take-home message with all of this is that our bodies are equipped naturally to release the necessary neurotransmitters to keep our bodies in balance. And it's with stress that things get out of balance, and when we take medication that replaces some of these, like the opioids replacing the endorphins, it further suppresses your body's ability to make their own. And the same thing with the SSRIs. I would argue that people, and everybody, this is not a talk about stopping medication at all, but we have to be aware of the side effects that can occur, and it's not, we just have to take that all into consideration. So compare this one with the prior slide where there was very little dopamine, no serotonin, and very little oxytocin. So I guess love is going to be like the best thing that we should aim for, because it's like all of the neurotransmitters are happy and dancing around and all high. And interestingly enough, happiness is mostly serotonin. So maybe that's why I eat a lot of carrots. I'm like a pretty happy person, but it gives you a good feel for, these ones are the more positive, and I call them the love-based comfort lens that encourage these sorts of feelings. Let's see. So how do we get to these positive emotions? I mean, to me, one of the most frustrating things is someone saying, "Oh, just be happy." What does that mean? What's a positive emotion? Name a few positive emotions. Can you name any out there?
Happy.
Happy. Okay. That is definitely, happiness is one of them. But these are the 10 most common emotions, positive emotions to explore, that Fredrickson in her text Positivity did a bunch of studies of lots of different groups of patients, businesses, social settings, lots of different things. And these were the ones that always came to the forefront. So I can never remember things just randomly, so I came up with this mnemonic, alpha jiggies, because alpha to me is like the primary thing, and jiggy sort of sounds like happy, so alpha jiggy is what I came up with. So the first one is amusement, love. What do you think the P is? Believe it or not, nobody's going to think of the P one.
Pleasure. Pride.
Pride. And pride is not a boastful kind of thing, but we're allowed to take pride in our accomplishments. It's okay to win once in a while. Everybody can't win all the time. We take pride in attempting. We don't always have to win, but we should be proud of our participation and how hard we tried. Hope and awe. And jiggies is, what do you think the J is?
Joy.
Mm-hmm. I is interest. G, gratitude. We see that a lot. Gratitude journals, definitely important because no matter where we're at, we can always find something that we can be grateful for. Inspiration, that thing which gives us the spark to explore something new and different, and serenity. So these are some things that, they seem positive, definitely, but I think it's important that we start getting a little bit more depth to our concept of positive emotions, and not positive as in good versus bad, but these are positive emotions in that they trigger the positive, the more upbeat neurochemicals, neurotransmitters that help to keep us comfortable and having a quality of life. And it's all coming from a real place. It's not artificially manufactured. I know this is heavy on the science, but a little bit more on the science, and I may just touch on this briefly, but some of the pearls of wisdom that I think are important as I move through the rest of this is that, as I mentioned before, Bruce Lipton in his Biology of Belief tells us that thoughts are the mind's energy, and they directly influence how the physical brain controls the rest of the body. So that's huge. And in putting all this together and looking at things from a lot of different places, the first part of this is a lot of science, and it's very left brain, but I felt the need, especially in dealing with the possibility of not promoting, but suggesting this in lieu of the pain scale at some point in hospitals. There has to be a good amount of science behind it. It's not like I just made it up. It's like, oh, this is cute. Like, yeah. But this actually has some good science behind it. The neuroplasticity piece, there's now no question that the brain remodels itself throughout life. And years ago, even 20 years ago, we would not have believed that. And it does retain the capacity to change itself as a result not only of passively experienced factors, such as really positive environments, but also because of the changes in the ways that we behave and in the ways that we think. It's powerful, and it's time to take back some of that power. Of course, more positivity from Fredrickson. So one of the things I like she says is gratuitous negativity, which once grew out of control, will no longer control your destiny. And I think if we think about that from the perspective of what we're bombarded with daily, in the news media, it's mostly negativity. And is there any doubt that we're more easily controlled when we're in a fearful place? So it doesn't have to be the way it is. It's all about integration, putting parts of the system back together, which is another part of my work here, and we'll get to that a little bit more. And then as far as addiction, one of the things that Gabor Mate drives home is that addiction is not just, it has a lot to do with an issue within the brain system itself that governs the most powerful emotional dynamic, and that is the attachment instinct. And in his work, he even argues that the reason that people do have challenges with addiction is that they are seeking connection and attachment. It's not so much that they are suppressing things within their bodies, but that they're seeking the attachment and their love. So it's definitely a uniquely wonderful way of reframing how we deal with folks who are struggling with addiction. We should not be ostracizing them. We should be, indeed, being much more compassionate and caring, and that will make them more responsive to the treatment and healing their wounds. So, with all of this, of course, I had to do a pilot study and what I did is I compared Comfort Quest with the pain scale. And I'm just not going to go too much into this other than the fact that I had 22 participants. And what I asked them was, we had them do their average pain scale and then do their comfort scale. And what this showed was that if their pain scale plus their comfort scale were added up to about 10, you knew that it would be a valid test because it's basically a reversed tool. And one of the other parts of this was to look at which of the two scales the patients or participants thought would make them more prone to encourage a quality of life. And none of the participants thought that the pain scale did that, and 73% felt that either slightly preferred or strongly preferred Comfort Quest for that. So I thought that was really, certainly a good start. And what I'd like to see happen is that we do a phase 3 study at either the VA or pain clinic where we can actually compare the two scales and test the actual quantitative amount of medication that folks need depending on which scale they use to track their pain levels. So let's see. A lot of information so far, and one of the important things is that I think through all of this, my message has been that our purpose is not to suppress our feelings. Our purpose is to actually be totally put together human beings where our body, mind, and spirit all come together. And Albert Einstein had a beautiful quote that said, "The most beautiful and profound emotion we can experience is the sensation of the mystical. It is the power of all true science." So I love that because we think of so many things, science is so left brain, and that the mystical is much more creative and right brain, but he puts those together nicely. And I see the prism as our lens to the mystical, where the spirit is showing itself through science. And one of my nieces has been in Antarctica, and she had made a comment about an iceberg when they were actually sailing around doing some scientific studies. And I said, "That's beautiful. I love the iceberg concept, because we only see about 10% of the ice, all of the ice above the surface, and 90% is below. And I really think that that speaks to what we've been dealing with in our lives as far as pain is concerned and our quality of life. We're only looking, actually, let me see if I can do this. Let me get the laser, let's see if I can, we're only looking at this part, typically, which is the part of our physical. And we're not really dealing with anything below the surface. So as long as we have been able to keep our physical okay, we assume that everything below the surface is okay. But I would argue that that's not the case, and that's why we keep getting pain continuing to bubble up, and that we need to start focusing on comfort, using our own innate healing to start getting some solutions to our issues. Okay, so so that doesn't show up there, okay. I like Bruce Lipton, he says, I truly believe that it is only when science and spirit and science are reunited that we will be afforded the means to create a better world. And so that is what I really seek to do through my work. And as we start, oops, there we go, but how to reignite all of these pieces. So that first part, and it's lengthy and in-depth, hopefully interesting. That left brain part, the first part of my study has been to that point, and I'm like, well, that's good, but how do we put the pieces together to better understand how we heal? And that's when, as I was walking through the courtyards last semester, I kept thinking, heroin, why are we having such a heroin overdose problem? And at that point, I immediately started thinking heroin as in the feminine. And that's where the sort of interesting twist to all of this came about. And in that, I started thinking about how perhaps the reason that we're struggling with so many problems with the opioid overdose and the heroin issue is that we have been suppressing the feminine. And I know it sounds a little mystical or metaphysical, perhaps, but just bear with me just a little bit. But if we think about the duality that we've had in history, that the rise of the thinking man, the rational, has been like the rise of patriarchy, and that's been great. We've needed to be thinking and doing all that, but along with that came the rejection of the feminine and a rejection of emotionality and feelings. And so, without going into all of this, what this led me to do in the second part of my work was to trace, using Murdoch's work. She actually, this was written in 1990, and it was written in response to the hero's journey that James Campbell had written, which is strictly, it's very patriarchal, and there's really no place for the feminine in his work. And when she spoke with him, and she writes in her book how she did speak with him about that, and he's like, well, women are in there, but they don't really have to do anything because everybody's doing it for them, and it's all about being taken care of, and so that didn't fit really well. So anyway, the most important pieces of this are starting with the rejection of the feminine, which has been suppressing our feelings, which has been trying to stomp down the pain. So that is the first part of it. And then even as women, we feel as though a lot of times the only way we can succeed in life is to embrace the masculine because of the fact that we see men succeeding, and that's how we feel as though, it's the only thing that we can do, so we give up further a little bit more of our femininity. So a lot of times that we just keep doing that. We do enduring tests and trials, we keep proving ourselves, things look like things are going fine. If we're having pain or if we're having discomfort, we do what we're told, we take our medication, we hold it all together, everything is fine, there's a solution of success until there's not, and then we hit rock bottom or something bad happens. And it's my belief that a lot of times we stop here. If it gets too uncomfortable, instead of going any farther to actually learn what we need to learn and to finally meet ourselves and who's our authentic selves, we just go backwards again. And we stay in this descent and we're like, okay, well, this is too uncomfortable. Let me go back to taking the pills or and this, again, I don't want it to be a bad thing about pills, but I don't want to feel anything else, so let me go ahead and keep medicating, or keep avoiding, or keep staying busy so I don't think about things. Whereas in Murdoch's work, and as I weaved it through my work as well, this is where we actually get to really know ourselves, and we actually can see the shadows, and this is where we have to dig through the shadows, and only then will we be able to meet ourselves, return to the known world with a potion, find and reunite with the masculine with heart, who's not just a dictatorial masculine, and then the reunion of both together as a whole self. So that is the piece of my work that's spun out of just really listening to what I heard inside as I was working with this, and that the heroine's journey really is part of the solution. It's not really the problem. Okay, thank you. It's not really part of the problem. I think it's the way of the divine feminine really saying, what if we stop fighting this and let's just put the pieces together? The masculine has a place, the feminine has a place. We need both of them to be complementary. One's not better than the other, and we just need to put the pieces back together again. And in my thesis, I go into all of that, but there's no way to cover all of that in 45 minutes. So I would just touch upon how the last part of my final product, which is one of the things that we do at Goddard, is our thesis. We do strictly a written thesis, or we can have some more creative parts, which is what I did. So each of the chapters has a little bit, and I'm not going to really go into that right now because of the time issue. And let's see. One of the important things about Comfort Quest, though, that I really want to drive home is that it's not just a pain management tool. It is to assist us to really explore the self and get to the root causes of the imbalance. So instead of just saying, okay, what's your pain level, and giving person pain medication, we assess a comfort level. And then based on that say, do you think it's a body, mind, or spirit issue? And if it's a body issue, we touch it, caress it, we acknowledge it. We say, well, what are you trying to tell me? My knee, my whatever. If it's a mind issue, monitor and modify your thinking patterns. Spirit, reconnect both with spirit as far as a religious connection or just community. So what we're doing is trying to deepen our human experience, which involves much more than simply avoiding pain. And to do that, we need to plant seeds. My goal is to plant seeds of healing, vitality, and improved quality of life. This just speaks to Klimt's Tree of Life, which I sort of showed that we integrate the earth, the water, and the mind. And here, hopefully, I will be publishing my thesis in book form, and I hope you like the feminine tree here, which is, I think, the transformative lens of healing with Comfort Quest, right, going through the heroine's journey. And in the actual full text, the first half is the scientific part, the second half is our heroine's journey and how all that fits together. It's definitely harnessing neuroplasticity to heal. Comfort rises from the ashes or the compost of the pain, and we're celebrating the tree of life and the chakras. And really one of the important parts is that integrating old trauma instead of suppressing the feelings. And so we've come full circle, and the pearls, that which we resist persists. We stop resisting our feelings and the feminine. We tune in and embrace the parts that hurt, shadows and all. The problems cannot be solved with the same mindset that created them. Our bodies are miraculous and can heal the pain. What we need to do is simplify, choose healthier options, and empower our inner pharmacy first. Pills may still be needed, but they don't necessarily be the first choice. And if we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change. Where comfort is possible, let's go towards that lens, focusing on positive goals. And I suggest using Comfort Quest to support and heal that inner wisdom, to feel, and as I said, adding that forgiveness and release. And I do believe that Comfort Quest will indeed be a very helpful piece of that healing process. This just talks about what's going on and where I'm going next. The Kickstarter program, I'm speaking at a conference, and this hopefully will connect. I'll show you. Don't even have to see it, but there, ta-da! That was, oh, it doesn't show up. Okay, well, that's not going to work. But it's good to test it now. Oops, and there went my computer. Nice. All right. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them. Shoo!